Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. You can check out new episodes of the show every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m. If you missed an episode or want to get more information about the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Blaine Bertsch. He's the CEO and co-founder at DryRun. Blaine, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you back on the show. You've kind of done radio before, you've done TV, and now I'm having you back on the radio show because you guys rolled out kind of a big update to DryRun, and I'm always kind of fascinated to have people like yourself on the show kind of again to kind of cover what they've learned and changed and kind of where they've taken their products, right? But maybe before we kind of get into exactly what DryRun is and kind of the updates, for those that never heard the first episode, maybe let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Well, I grew up in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada.
Sure.
Born and bred there. Started my business there as well, and was a student at the University of Alberta for both a bachelor's and master's degrees in design. So I'm one of the co-founders that's actually like design-related co-founder or design expertise co-founder, which is sometimes a little bit rare, I suppose, in software. Yeah.
Yeah, And we can kind of cover some of those maybe a bit later, just kind of the challenges of being a designer, founding a company. But so walk me through kind of what exactly is DryRun and why did you decide to found it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, DryRun, it's a financial forecasting tool for small business. It's cloud-based, and the one kind of unique thing, I guess, about DryRun is it's not just about forecasting your cash flow, which is a big part of DryRun, but it's also the way we built DryRun makes it easy to forecast other financial metrics, in particular your sales forecasts, kind of setting an ongoing budget forecast, and some of our customers are even doing profit forecasts and things like this. So it's really simple to use, but it's also very powerful. And what we try and do is help business owners kind of get a complete picture of where they're going. So it's not retrospective, it's not records, it's not what's happened in the past. It's what's happening this month, this quarter, this year. Setting some of those goals, watching that cash flow, and having that sort of bird's eye view of all of the really important stuff that's happening in the finances in your business. And from a business owner perspective, so that it's they can see what's going on. It's very operational. One of the things that makes DryRun really unique amongst its sort of peers is that it's scenario based. So that means that you can do sort of what if scenarios. Do growth planning. What if we want to expand? What if we don't get paid this invoice on time? What happens? But because we also have that sort of scenario based power built in, that's what allows users to kind of look at their near-term cash flow right alongside kind of a sales pipeline that stretches out a little bit further, and get a more comprehensive picture of what's going on.
No, that's very cool. And I think, like, to your background, you were a business owner before you started DryRun, and you've taken kind of other business owners that are using the platform and kind of really added a bunch of new stuff to DryRun that, you took users' feedback, kind of your background, made some changes to DryRun recently, and you pushed out a big update. So for people that knew the product before, what's the same and what did you roll out for them that, you're excited that they get to play with and, the new features that they get?
Yeah, this big rollout we just had was it was really for a big customer segment that is incredibly important to us. But we didn't really have it set up really well for them. And the feedback from that segment was just instrumental in helping us sort of move DryRun forward. And that's accountants and also, other financial pros. So when we first started DryRun, and a real big sort of basis for our customers are business owners. And they're we kind of had that very sort of narrow view, I think, which was actually, a side note that was probably a little bit of an incorrect view, is we focused too much on the business owner and didn't spend enough time talking with finance pros. What we found over the last year as we relaunched DryRun after a bit of a pivot, that accountants and finance pros were, just incredibly interested in dry run and really supportive, gave a lot of feedback. But one of the things we found was that we hadn't really set it up to reduce their friction when they're working with their customers. So just a little bit of an overview. Dry run works really well, not only just for a single sort of a business owner to use it, but it works really well as a collaborative tool. So, our customers, like a lot of times, will have, two business partners that are using dry run. They'll also have their accountant that's involved and may pop in periodically to take a look at how things are going. And sometimes other management people within the company will get sort of snippets. They'll get to look at just little parts of the overall forecast. So it's really, it can keep a lot of people informed. But the big thing for us is figuring out that a lot of times our customers actually are even in-house accountants, and sometimes accountants that are serving a lot of clients. They serve them in different ways. So some clients will have are very kind of self-reliant, and the accountant just is like, hey, just use this tool. All the way up to the point where the accountant is building out all the forecasts, is in touch all the time, is helping them manage that cash flow and helping them even figure out like how that sales pipeline is going to look if once that data comes to them. So it's a very collaborative product. But what we realized is that the accountants, we had a lot of friction in how they use dry run with their customers. They wanted a better way to look at all of their clients, organize them better, keep track of all these different customers, all of these multiple forecasts in a nice, clean, simple way. And even easier ways to just pay for their clients all on one shot, and some of that sort of side as well. So there was a couple points of friction that were really fairly big from that side, and it's not. If you've used dry run before and you're a business owner, you probably won't notice that much. You'll see like definitely some more power and some more capability. But for our accountants, it's very, very powerful. We also added some capability for those sort of pro finance people to connect to multiple integrations all at once. So a base account, you can kind of connect to a single Xero account or a single QuickBooks Online, a single Pipedrive account, and can always disconnect and connect to a different one. But there's a lot of friction there. And so with our new plan level, it's this more advanced collaboration level. Accountants can just connect to, all of their clients, all the different accounts, a bunch of Xero accounts, some QuickBooks Online, and just connect to everything and just keep their entire business and all of their clients connected and online and see what's going on and refresh that data. So from the accountant's point of view, they I think are going to be, they're really excited about what we've added because it just reduces their friction, makes their life super easy. So it's not some of those what you'd call like the real sexy additions to dry run, but for those finance pros, it is really a terrific addition for them.
Sure, but I think that's also just really good advice in itself, right? Like you took actual user feedback to maybe not necessarily build the next like 0.5 of the product, or maybe you did call it like a significant kind of update. But I love the fact that you took actual users' feedback and kind of built some things for them, right? So they could, like you said, to kind of like, so there's no friction, right? For their side. And I think like a lot of people kind of sometimes chase clients' tails, or they don't really get, they just kind of like, they get every kind of request and they just try to implement as much as possible. But like, I love how you guys just said like, this is a real problem. We've heard this from a bunch of people, and you decided to say like, you know what, we really need to implement that, right? And I think that's the smart way to actually build kind of SaaS products. And you also have your clients feel like they're actually part of the development. And I think a lot of times they're more loyal to you because they feel like you're building the product for them, even though you're not, like you are, but you aren't at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's the biggest change to our business from when we first started dry run, our first sort of MVP version, to what we have now and where we're headed. Our roadmap is it's so incredibly informed by our users and by our customers now. And one of the most valuable tools we have, like we use Intercom to contact our customers, for them to contact us within the app, to get help from us, to do all sorts of automated messaging. But what that's done is opened up the doors to so many conversations with our customers and with our users, and so many questions coming in, and that's just absolute gold. Because you're right, it'd be too easy to just every time someone requests something, just kind of go and chase off trying to do it. But when you have enough feedback and enough contact with your customers, that's where you start to see trends. That's where it's funny, and when you're working on a product, because you know the product so well and you're listening to your customers or talking with them all the time, sometimes a suggestion will come in and it's just like, oh man, that, like, the first time you hear it, you're like, that is just a great suggestion. And sometimes it can be a really simple thing. We're just like, yeah, we're doing that. That is just overlooked, but it's a brilliant suggestion that everyone will benefit from, even though they haven't asked for it. And then other times you'll get a suggestion and you're just kind of like, well, that's kind of interesting. Let's file that away. And we always do. Like we add it into, like, we use Basecamp for a lot of these discussions. We add it in so we can kind of keep track. And sometimes over a few months, you start seeing the same sort of request over and over again. And that's where it leads you to some of these features that you hadn't really thought of necessarily, or you didn't know the importance. But those customers sort of guide you there, because when you hear it enough over and over again, suddenly it becomes a priority, and then everything in between, of course. So for a SaaS product like this, I can't recommend more how important it is to just have that constant contact with your customers. And just a couple of little tiny tips, like we found using Intercom, one of the biggest things is just respond super fast. Sure. And that's how you get conversations going. Our customers are busy. They're business owners, they're accountants, they're doing all these, they're just swamped all the time. So we try and get to their questions absolutely as fast as humanly possible, because that's really promotes those conversations. And a lot of times they're like, wow, someone's actually answering questions. Oh yeah, we're right here. What can I do for you? It makes a big difference. You learn so much. And the other thing that's been really, when you build a product like this and you kind of put it out in the wild, and it's a little bit, it's unnerving, because you're like, man, I hope we hit this right. I hope we have it right. And the customer feedback, it seems to, as we just keep developing and we're responding to them and we're finding the product and we're understanding the product more, understanding their needs more, the feedback becomes much more positive. Like, not that it was ever negative, but man, we just get some really great feedback and some great suggestions. But you can tell people really love the product, and that really buoys you up. Like, it makes you want to, really push to help them, because you're getting this great feedback. And so it's not just like that roadmap. It also it serves your customer, but also kind of energizes the team a little bit to have this positive feedback, coming back as well.
Sure. No, I think that's really good advice. And you touched on a few things that I kind of want to mention. I think, again, I love how you're using something like Intercom, because you could technically build, something into your platform, but to do kind of messaging and that kind of thing. But it just takes away from what you're trying to build, right? So it's nice that you guys are using other tools to just kind of handle certain parts of the business that generate, say, feedback or put in features, but don't actually, have anything to really do with the product other than just reach out to your customers. The other thing I think you touched on that was really important that I learned too is customer service, like just having somebody that they can actually talk to that's not this like automated thing or just online help documentation. Like, you should still have that, but like, I think a lot of people will pay even more money sometimes for your product if you have somebody that like picks up the phone or like emails them back within a reasonable amount of time, right? And I think a lot of startups, especially early on, maybe forget about those things, and I love how you kind of touched on that, and I think that's super important.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Like, responding, I always tell the team, responding quick is, and responding quick and being like just really gracious and glad that somebody's trying the product, even if they have a complaint. Those sorts of things are so valuable too, because if they have a complaint, you learn from it. If they've identified a bug, you learn from it. Sure. But if you respond really quick, they respond really well back. Even if you have a bug, they're like, wow, this is terrific. You're taking care of me. But yeah, going back to your first point, that's something that we're always really cautious of, as well as staying in our lane. Like, what does dry run do, and what do we build into the app? What do we do internally that is really core to what we offer? And if it's not core to what we offer and we can use an outside service, we're not custom building it. So we use like a inline manual to do a walkthrough for when people are first signing up. We use intercom to contact our customers. We use Basecamp to manage. It's a little bit separate, but of course to manage our team and all of our efforts there, and keep everything on track. And there's quite a few different tools we use, all the way from marketing all the way through to development. And you want to focus on what you do best and not try and build out these other parts. If somebody else is doing a great job of that, take advantage of that. Don't try and stretch yourself too thin, because just your core product is going to be difficult enough. It's going to be hard enough to build.
Sure. So I'm curious, do you at what point do you decide, okay, like you've gotten this request a few times, is it after you've gotten that request 5 times, 50 times? Like, at what point do you decide kind of, oh, we should maybe look at implementing this into the product? Or does it really depend on how complicated it can technically be to implement? Or is it a bit of both?
It's a real combination. Like we look at, but part of it is when you're analyzing what they're asking for. Sometimes it's just, sometimes people ask for something, and you even hear it quite often, but it's not really. It's just not part of dry run. It doesn't even necessarily make sense. So sometimes people ask for things, and they're just kind of asking. But when you reply to them and say, yeah, and that's like some of the reporting requests that we have from dry run, it would mimic the accounting tools.
Okay.
But dry run doesn't look backwards; it looks forward.
Right.
So trying to run some of your profit and loss statement, well, that actually doesn't make sense to come from dry run, because dry run is looking forward, totally speculative. So it doesn't make sense. So sometimes we'll get requests for things, but it just doesn't really make sense. And I don't think maybe some of the trial users or whatever have kind of wrapped their head around, okay, what do we do? Which again, like that falls on us to make sure that we're doing a good job of explaining that. But we just, when you understand what they're facing, what their questions are, almost every time when I write back and say, well, no, this is why we don't do that, you get totally makes sense. Awesome. Right. And then, like I said, sometimes you'll just hear something and say, like, that's a brilliant idea, we're doing it. And other times it feels a little bit sometimes like reading the tea leaves, but you have to take a look at, how often are these requests coming in. But like you said, it's also, what is the technical challenge? Sometimes it can be a very reasonable request, but you're looking at, when you start laying it into your roadmap and your top priorities of what you need to do, sometimes there's some really great features that they've been asked for a number of times, but they're not mission critical. It's not the difference between someone buying and not buying dry run, or really having a great experience with dry run. It would help, but it could be a lot of work to implement. And so that is definitely part of it, where you might look at something that's like, man, that's brilliant, and it's like a half a day and it's in. And other times it's like, yeah, man, that could be a couple of weeks, and it's not. And they would almost have the same presence, right? So it's the weight we would carry on our shoulders, or in development, is definitely part of the equation. So there are no hard and set rules. That's why more feedback is better, as much feedback as you can get, because you have to balance all of these things out. Like, how much is it going to cost us? How difficult is it to implement? How many people are asking? How often are they asking for it? But also, what's the overall impact for those users? Because, sometimes we'll get a lot of requests for what seemingly is a small thing, but it's actually a big technical challenge. It's just, yeah, great idea, man. That's like, much later in the year, maybe we'll tackle that, because it's too much for the limited amount of payoff you would get. So.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm always just kind of curious to know how people do that, because it can be tricky to decide what features to implement. And, like, there's a whole bunch of variables that could change that. The one thing I'm curious about as well, just kind of on the customer service side of things, do you have dedicated people for customer service, or do you guys kind of share the responsibility? And is everybody expected to kind of answer questions?
Yeah, it's a shared responsibility.
Okay.
And because we don't have somebody dedicated. At some point we will. Like I believe when we have kind of enough questions, we'll have somebody. We have a fairly comprehensive help site, which I think actually helps mitigate, and a lot of our automated messaging through Intercom, and that also helps mitigate like all these questions coming in. So it's not overwhelming by any means right now, but we do have everybody sort of on board to answer questions, and partly it's a little bit of what the questions are. Like sometimes if there is something that could potentially be a technical issue, I'll actually flag it to my co-founder, who's a technical co-founder, and our technical director. And so he'll sort of take that over, and he'll take those conversations over. And other times it's more on like a sales side or a business logic side. We get a lot of questions that don't actually have a lot to do with dry run. In a way, it's people actually struggling with how do they do this in their business? How do they get the ball rolling? And we're more than happy to talk with them about that. And a lot of times that falls a bit on my shoulders just because of my business background and talking with customers all the time. So I can usually identify some good, sort of structure processes they could put into place. So it would be hard, I think, to have just like a customer support person that, would do in some cases much more than sort of triage, like who has to talk with this person because of the question they're asking.
No, I think that's really good advice. And I know, like, I think it's Mike, the CEO of FreshBooks, talk a number of years ago. And he said every one of their employees does customer support at some point. Like, he even takes a day a month, I think, and does customer support. And, at first I kind of thought, well, that seems ridiculous. Like, why wouldn't you just, like, have a team? But if you have people that are actually working on the product, actually doing customer support, and they're kind of in front of the customer, they can kind of sometimes just see things through that customer's eyes. And I think in some cases, the more interaction that the entire team has with customers, even if it's not on a daily basis, can really help and grow your product and make it kind of better just by doing something as simple as just fielding some like emails sometimes, or like using the chat or answering the messages that come through the little chat thing on your website.
Yeah, no, it's you need that core team really understanding where you're headed, because like you look from our marketing side and our sales side, they learn so much when they're actually fielding those questions and talking with people, and because we need them to understand what the challenges are, like what are our customers facing, so that because our sales, we're not going to sell somebody something they don't need. Like our sales are all based on, can we help you with what you're doing? And the better we understand the issue they're facing, the challenge they're facing, the better we, will understand, how to approach them and say, hey, I think we might be a really great help, and here's how I think we can help you. And then there's also sometimes where it's like, you know what, no, we're not a good fit because you're looking for something different. But you understand that, and we don't want to waste their time. We want to be helpful in that sense too. So it's really important to have everybody, I think, talking with customers, and especially when it's in their area of expertise. And so that's a really hard thing to just sort of generically outsource. Like I mentioned, that a lot of the technical things, or if there's some weird little bug that crept up, that goes to my co-founder, but there's always more than one person involved when it's a big question or a little issue or some feedback. We always want to talk about that and sort of say like, hey, this is what this person asked. Like, hey, maybe we should make a help post up, or maybe we should, is there a way to sort of make something actionable sometimes on that feedback? So and that's like, I guess we have just to step back a little bit. Like my co-founder, who's the technical side, is it's so critical. Like when we're talking about new features and new, I never go to him and say, hey, put this in. Like it's always a conversation. It's always like, hey, here's the feedback we're getting from our customers, and how what do you think? Like how tough is this to implement? How does it make sense? How should we prioritize this? And all the way down to how do we implement it so it's got the best UI? And like we want everybody kind of in that conversation and making sure that we're we have that feedback. We have different feedback from different sides, so that it's not just sort of blindly, rushing into the wilderness. You're kind of like got everybody on the same page, and a little bit of pre-planning and really understanding the problems. It saves you a lot of time, saves you a lot of money. It's a much better benefit to the customer if you really plan it out well.
Sure. And I also think it's interesting when other people can hear that are on the team, kind of hear how the customer describes either certain things about the product or the terminology they use. And sometimes you're like, you know what, I keep hearing like this word called for like this action. Maybe we should change that action to actually be called that, right? Or at least it opens the discussion to that, right? And I found that useful for me even.
Yeah, exactly. If you're listening to your customers, they will tell you there's just so much gold in there from the, like I mentioned, the product roadmap, but also
Sure.
from our side right now, like such a big challenge is the marketing and sales side. Like that's a real challenge to get, cut through the thick, the internet is just so chock full of everything. Like how do you actually get through to your customers? It's just, they've got billions of choices. How do we
Sure.
get through to them with our message?
Sure.
That is just, it's so challenging. It's so much more challenging than I ever thought. It's a little bit of the idea that, well, if you're just out there, they'll find you no, it just doesn't happen. A lot of
Sure.
times people don't even know they're looking for you. And, with as much effort we put into content marketing and SEO and everything, it still boggles my mind at times when I'll be on a call with somebody and they're just like, man, I've been looking for something like you for 6 months. And I'm like, oh, how come we're not being found, right?
Sure.
Seems like we should be being found. If I do tests, it seems like it works. But it's just, there's so much noise out there that it's really hard to get through to people. So that's another side of it is trying to understand, like, the more focused we can become on our customer segments, and the more we can understand a narrower and narrower and narrower perfect customer profile, it makes it easier for us to do outbound sales, objective, or like meet those objectives. And it also helps us with that inbound and content marketing and SEO and all those things to try and make sure we're found by these perfect customers.
Sure.
Even though like we've got this wide range, like I would say like our perfect customer is probably like maybe 50% of our customer base. And the rest is just this hodgepodge of people with all these different challenges. But we can't market to such a wide range of needs and locations and everything. So we have to try and figure out who are those perfect segments, because it's so much easier to get to a narrow segment. And again, a lot of that is based on customer feedback and looking at your data and asking questions and, how did you find us, and figuring out who these people are so that we get a better idea of who that perfect customer is for us.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And if you can kind of take what you've learned from the customers that maybe took 6 months to find you, and you say like, I kept Googling whatever the word is or a combination of words, and you're like, maybe we should work that into some of our sales and marketing and or like our outbound kind of sales. And so I'm kind of curious, because last time we talked, you were kind of in the whole kind of space of, obviously doing some more sales, doing some more marketing. What have you guys kind of been trying more and more of recently that you found has worked and hasn't worked?
There's a couple things. First, on our inbound side, we had some successes with some of our content marketing.
Okay.
But we had a lot of stuff that wasn't working and wasn't working at all. And it's interesting looking at that content marketing, as it feels very much like it's either a winner or a loser. There's nothing in between.
Okay.
You either get like almost nothing, or you get a lot of traffic from something. And what we kind of realized, and I think part of this came from I think I was reading some article or a blog post or something at some point. I can't even remember. I read these all the time. I can't remember who it was, but
Sure.
Whatever the article is about, it kind of made a light bulb go on in my mind of realizing that we were trying to do too many things with our content. So, we're writing an article and it would be like, okay, well, it kind of is SEO, but we also want it buzzworthy. We want people to share it on social, and we want, what we want doesn't really matter, because that's not how people really behave. And so
Sure.
what we kind of came to the conclusion is that for our inbound, SEO sort of based, which actually brings a lot of people to us. It is really an important part of our marketing. We need to go even more focused on our keyword research, trying to understand our customers, and writing articles that are keyword rich, but also really interesting articles. It has to be both. But we were very much saying, okay, these may not attract as much attention on social or anything, but they're going to work a lot better for inbound because they're focused. They have one goal in mind, for people to help people find us when they're searching for something to solve a problem. And then on the other side, we're looking at more on the things that may get shared on social, and people will find us in other ways, is much more sort of buzzworthy and much more interesting, much more story based. So instead of trying to do all things with right down the middle, it's much more, hey, this stuff is inbound. People are searching for us. We have to help them find us. And on the other side, let's try and draw some attention, and let's do something really interesting, really story driven, to try and get people taking notice and learning about us and sharing the stories. So that's something that we've just sort of been implementing over the last month or so. It's time will tell. I think it's a much better approach because what we were doing wasn't working very well, and I think it's more of focusing exactly on what something's supposed to do for you, how it's supposed to perform, but also really in a way upping the quality of it, like taking it much further in whatever direction it needs to go. So that, I think we'll see. That takes. We are seeing a bump already, but I think it'll take months to really see, like, okay, how much of a bump, how much impact is that kind of having?
No, that makes a lot of sense. And the thing that I find interesting about it is a lot of it's just trial and error. And it sounds stupid to say, but like, you try something, you're like, oh, well, this isn't working, or this is working, so we need to either like stop doing that or keep doing it, right? The other thing I think, and I'm curious to know your thoughts on, is like when I've been kind of promoting the show, for example, some networks just like, I'll get tons of new people coming, and others aren't worth my time at all. And so I'm assuming you found that as well, that like certain social platforms work better than others, and some are just not worth your time at all. Have you found that?
To some degree, we definitely have, but to some degree, I think the actual content hasn't fit the channel necessarily.
Fair.
So that's something that we're looking at, is trying to figure out, like, hey, our is that customer segment, is it on that channel? And if they are, what would reach them? Like, what was so we've had a little bit of we like you mentioned, it's trial and error, which with us it's just test. Like you can't you make these guesses like, hey, I think this is going to work, but you need that data back to know if it's going to work. And it's that's always ongoing. And I think, again, like, I think we have a much better strategy than we did 6 months ago, and I think it will take us further, but it's not like some perfect strategy. We'll 3 months down the road, I'm sure we're going to be looking back and going, okay, this stuff is working, this stuff isn't, and we'll just know much more about it. And that's going to be, I think, a big help. The other thing we did with, like, we rebuilt our website. That was a few months ago now. But it was a substantial difference for us. I think it improved our SEO quite a bit, but it also improved the messaging for the customers and for the people that were coming to look at us. So they just better understand what Dry Run's about, how it will help them. We've been running that for a few months now, and we're just kind of at that point where it's time to take another look at it and say, okay, how do we make that message more clear? What kind of questions are people asking? Are we answering it on that? And so there's no sort of one simple answer. It's just so many different little factors, and they just add up and add up and add up and add up until you have, hopefully a real success and make some nice leap forward.
Sure. No, but I think that's really good advice in itself, right? Because I think a lot of people that haven't done this or not doing it yet, it sounds so like glamorous and easy, right? For a lack of a better term, but in reality, it's like a lot of hard work. It's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of like rework. It's a lot of, sometimes you have to totally pivot. Sometimes you partially pivot. Sometimes you go after a different vertical. Sometimes you're like, wow, we have new clients in this vertical that I never even thought of would use our product. And like, maybe that's your target market now. Like kind of how you probably, the day that you probably came up with the idea for Dry Run to today is probably quite different, or at least how the product is today, correct?
Oh, it's almost laughable. If I think back to when I first came up with the idea of Dry Run, what my thoughts were, what my expectations were, what you know, it all seems so simple. When you're starting, everything seems simple, right? And
Sure.
it's when you really dive into it, nothing is easy. Nothing comes easy. It's hard. It's expensive. Everything takes longer than you ever thought. And there's a lot of surprises, and there's a lot of, almost like I mentioned with some of the some of the content marketing stuff before. I find that a lot of times there's big wins and there's losses. Like
Sure.
it's not a nice smooth gradual climb upwards. It's like when we launched our new website, our conversion rate doubled overnight.
Oh, wow.
That's substantial. Which tells me kind of in a way like how bad our site was before, to be honest. But there's been a number of things like that where it's like you fight and you battle, and same with that content stuff. And it's like, well, man, these 10 articles aren't doing anything. All of a sudden one does.
Sure.
And one will just all of a sudden like, wow, we're getting a lot of searches, or something we put on social. We're getting like, man, super high relevancy scores. Our price is great, bringing people in. But then you're still trying to battle to figure out, is it converting? Because you can get a lot of false positives. You can have a lot of traffic. We have this one article that just brings in a ton of traffic for us every month, which is, and it's kind of in the realm. So I think it's probably a good thing, but I actually don't think it's a very high converting article.
Okay.
So it's, you can be misleading because you're just like, oh man, that one's bringing thousands a month. Like, this is awesome. And no, it's probably, most of them are the wrong people, I think. And so it's to some degree. And that's one of the things that, looking back of when I started Dry Run, I was picturing like, who would use Dry Run? And that's changed a lot. That's
Sure.
changed a lot. I actually believed when I first started Dry Run, I was coming from a small business. I was the small business owner.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, I had this very definite wall between us and our accountant. That our accountant did our taxes, and I was sitting in my chair trying to figure out, where are we going? Are we getting to get paid on time? Do I have enough money coming in to pay, all of our staff on Friday? Like,
Sure.
those sorts of questions, right? And what I found was yeah, accountants they want to help with that. They understand that, they really care about it. They're there to help. But so when I first started Dry Run, I was like, it was all for business owners. I didn't realize that accountants really wanted to use Dry Run. And there's challenges now talking to accountants, again, talking to your customers. There's so many challenges that accountants face I just didn't know about, because I never bothered to ask. So, their whole world is getting turned upside down because so many businesses are moving to the cloud, and bookkeeping is completely different now because, it's not necessarily the box of receipts anymore. A lot of it's on a credit card. It goes right automatically into a piece of software. And so the financial pros their world is changing now. They're competing with people on the other side of the country that know the same tax laws that they do and can help. When people are in the cloud, man, you can serve them from anywhere. So they're trying to figure out, well, how do we better serve our customers? How do we add additional services that might replace some of these ones that are happening automatically now? How do I stay in touch with my customers? And so now they're getting tasked more and more. It's interesting because now that there's all these cloud tools and they're plugging in all these systems together, business owners are now getting more data than they had before. And we're seeing more and more that the bookkeepers and accountants are being tasked with, can you help us figure out our cash flow? Can you help us figure out our sales pipeline? And they're looking at something like Dry Run saying, well, yeah, then I'm not mailing them a spreadsheet, and we don't have all the issues with version control and all of this. We can actually collaborate. It's easy to use. But they can also, it gives them a way to stay in touch with their customers every month, which we found is a huge issue for a lot of public accountants. That,
Sure.
How do I stay in touch with the customer instead of just talking with them at tax time? And offer value, not just stay in touch, but offer value. And so now they can kind of pop in and say, hey, I just took a look. It looks like you might have a bit of an issue, a month and a half down the road here. Do you have some invoices that you're sending out that are net 30 that you can get out right away because we need the money coming in? Offer some sort of advice as well. So that was one thing. The other thing is I've kind of found out as well that our clients are actually bigger than I thought they would be as far as just the size of the business.
Okay, interesting.
They're from a much wider range of sectors, and they're much larger than I thought. And it just so that actually really informs our roadmap as well, because now we're looking at bringing out a third sort of pricing or plan in dry run, but it's going to have some more advanced features that a lot of our customers don't need. We don't want to make things more complicated for them, but we get a lot of requests for some of this more in-depth analysis and functionality from some of the larger companies. And so it's going to allow us to have that third pricing level and add that in and have a lot more capability to dry run and serve those customers. So that's been a little bit of a surprise to us as well. Like, it's just from what I thought dry run was to what I see it today is just it's just so much more different. But the opportunity is also a lot larger than I ever thought as well, which is kind of a daunting but also a really cool thing.
No, that's great, man. So I'm curious to know, are you guys doing anything in the outbound kind of sales department? I know we kind of touched on like sales and marketing a little bit a few minutes ago, but I'm kind of curious to know, are you guys actually like actively reaching out to anybody or any like kind of types of things? Or are you just kind of doing more, marketing and see who comes to you?
Yeah, we've just started doing some outbound, just because we've found that their inbound, it's a slog. Like it's okay. It's working okay. Our conversion rates are actually really solid. It's just, how do we get enough people knowing about us? And
Sure.
Our content marketing, I think we've got a better plan, but man, it's months in the making, and we still don't know if it's going to work,
Right.
to the level that we need. So we had to augment it with some outbound. So again, that was our initial outbound was just some testing. We had to find out, like, is this a channel that works? Does it make sense? So we did our own research. We made up our own list. We didn't buy lists from anybody. We targeted who we thought, okay, who could be a really good fit for us. And then we tried just sending out some emails. And there's all these different spam laws and things out there too. So we're very conscious of that and knowing, okay, well, who can we email? What kind of message can we send? What keeps everything on side and legit? And so, kind of an interesting thing is we actually can't technically email Canadians. So we don't,
Right.
which is really bizarre, being Canadian based and talking with Canadians like, honestly, I had a great message to someone on LinkedIn the other day. Somebody connected with me. I sent him a quick note of what we do, and he's really interested in it. And I'm looking at it going, yeah, I would not, outside of LinkedIn, been allowed to actually email that person, even though they really want to know about us. So anyways, we did some of that research. We came up with, we built our own list just by doing our own research, which was a real slog. But we wanted to make sure we're actually hitting who we thought were prime prospects to find out, is this a channel that'll work for us? And so that's what we did. We made up a list. We sent out some emails. I sent them, like I said, they're all compliant to what we were allowed to do.
Sure.
But it was just a one-to-one email. We actually had really quite a good response. Like we had almost, I had almost no negative feedback. Maybe a couple of people said, "Oh, yeah, I'd rather, take me off the list," kind of thing, but they were even polite about it. But we had really quite a substantial, I think it was around 18% actually responded to us asking for more information.
Wow, that's great, man.
Which was quite fascinating to us. But then, of course, some of them still are, you still have to move them along the chain to where they, maybe sign up for a demo and then maybe sign up for a free trial and then become a customer. You still have a long way to go. But once we had that evidence back that, hey, this is kind of working, we started to refine our outbound system. And so we've just started really recently using a new system called GrowBots, which looks really interesting for anyone that's looking for like an outbound sort of sales help. This is one that you may want to look at. We evaluated quite a number of different systems, and this one was there are two things that attracted us to us. First of all, it's expensive, by the way, but it
Okay.
was what it did was it gave us an automated emailing system, and we do have one. We're using Autopilot for instead of Mailchimp. We were with Mailchimp. We moved to Autopilot
Okay.
for kind of our marketing outreach, our newsletter, things like that. Growbots kind of has that sort of automated messaging built in, so you can set up cadences. So you have here's our first touch, a few days later, second touch, a few days later, third touch. They can unsubscribe, all that kind of stuff. But the real value to us is that they offer very well researched prospects. And
Oh,
so
interesting.
again, it's not just buying a list, because I'm buying a list is probably not the best, from my experience, the best way to get top notch prospects.
Fair enough.
And they have a really nice system that they have a very comprehensive list of detailed sort of customers, and then we can go through and do our own research. And so again, it's faster. It's not ultra fast, but we go through, we do research to make sure that does this look like someone that is going to need us. Like that's really what it comes down to. Is it's not just like, hey, send this out to everybody. It's like, does this look like somebody that really would value us and would really need us? And then we send out these emails to them, and it starts with this automated email. Our early response has been, I think, solid. I think again, we have a long ways to go, and according to Growbots, we have a long ways to go. They say it'll take a couple months to really get your feet under you and figure out what's working and which segments are working and which searches are working, but that's something that we're really actively pursuing right now. So, if we talk in a few months, I can probably tell you if it is working for us and how well it's working for us. But I do know it has led to definitely to some demos, some free trials, and even in this first month. So it looks promising.
Sure. No, I love that. I think that's great. And part of the reason I really like having you on the show is you're willing to openly talk about kind of the good and bad about running a startup, right? From kind of actually building it to kind of business development and sales and marketing and kind of the stuff you're trying and playing with, right? And I love how you're kind of like, well, we really don't know yet if it's working. It seems to, but like, give me a few months to tell you, right? Because I think so many people won't even tell you that like off the record, but there's even less people that will tell you kind of on the record and share it to the world, saying like, this is what's working and not working for us, right? And I think it's really good advice, and it's really useful, and it also kind of helps people that are maybe going through kind of maybe a slower or kind of unfortunate time with their startup, right? That they realize other people are going through the same struggles, and they've either been there and gotten through it, or maybe we'll go through it again, because we all know being in a startup is like a roller coaster ride, and some days you're having like the greatest morning, and then the afternoon you're like, oh my god, everything's on fire, right? Like that's why I love like the show Silicon Valley so much, where like they're demoing and like the servers are on fire. That's like literally like the funniest thing right? So I love like having people like yourself that are openly willing to talk about this stuff, right? But
Yeah,
no, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, absolutely. And it is like it's so difficult, and it's for it's so misleading when you see these startups that seem to cash out and got this happen and that happened, this massive growth. Well, look, that's like the lottery winners. There's most of them have to build a business. Most of them have to know their customers and do it the hard way and slog it out, and it is really tough and really hard. And so I'm like, always happy to share, because I want, if some people can avoid some of the mistakes I made, great, that would be outstanding. And I'm hoping that other people will do the same for me, because there's a few things that I know kind of in my past that I've either read or talking with someone or heard, and it just all of a sudden the light goes on, right? And it can sometimes be a conversation, can actually be a fundamental shift for your business just overnight, because it just, all this information comes in, and suddenly it's that little tipping point where the light goes on and go, oh man, we got to head this way. And so I love sharing this stuff. The one thing I would always caution though is, some of the stuff that's worked for us, it just isn't going to work for a lot of other businesses, and vice versa. So, you also have to, you don't want to go chasing and say, oh, this worked for them, let's do that, right? Because it's a lot of times it doesn't. And the way to get around that and really trust yourself and understand how to do that is, again, it goes all the way back to the more you know about your customer, the more you know about your customer segment, the more you're talking with them, the more you can start to cut through the fog a little bit and figure out, what's going to work in my business, in this little tiny, segment or sliver that we're tackling. Could be very, very different from, you can be very different even from your competitor.
Sure.
A competitor may just they're going to probably have their differences. Of course, they're going to be a different product, maybe a slightly different market. Could be quite different the way that they reach people. So it's hopefully what I'm sort of sharing is more of like, hey, if you want to try some of the things we've done, give it a go, because I'm more than happy to share. But more so, I would rather say don't just sort of blindly chase these things. Try and know as much about your business and your customer and your segment as you possibly can, and make as informed decisions as you can, and then test, and just pick one or two things at a time. You can't do 50 different things. It's like for us right now, we've got this inbound plan. This is what we're doing. We got an outbound plan. This is what we're doing. And in both cases, we're trying to focus, refine them, and figure out how to make them really effective to figure out, like, hopefully one of these will really take off, or both. So we have, we can get traction, and we can get that segment really working and really well defined.
I think that's all really good advice. But Blaine, sadly, we're coming to the end of the show, so maybe let's close with mentioning where people can get more information about yourself and Dry Run online.
Yeah, absolutely. You can just go to dryrun.com. You can ask us questions there. There's a free 30-day trial, and you can sign up for a demo as well if you'd like to basically have a walkthrough. So we'd love to talk with you. And if you're facing those challenges of cash flow, sales pipeline, budget forecasts, and how to take your company forward, and how to especially if you're a high growth company, take a look at Dry Run. I think it can be a real help to you.
Well, Blaine, again, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and I'm sure we'll do another one of these at some point.
Absolutely. I'd love to anytime, Kevin. It was great chatting with you again, and looking forward to next time.
All right, man. Well, you have a good rest of your day. We'll talk soon.
All right. Okay. You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. Thanks for listening. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check them out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.